7 of them. Not 1, not 2. 7. And they're not just some choir boys with wings and harps. No, these are the heavies, the cosmic hitters, the ones who don't blink when universes collapse. And they're standing there, wide-eyed, not because something went wrong, but because you still don't get it. You. The one who's been nudged, warned, whispered to, maybe even screamed at in your dreams, and yet here you are, confused, distracted, scrolling. They warned you. Not once, not twice, over and over like a scratched-up record screaming from the heavens, wake up, wake up, wake up. But see, that's the funny part. You didn't. You hit snooze. You rolled over. You poured coffee over chaos and called it a routine because you thought divine warnings would come wrapped in velvet, maybe delivered by someone with a soft voice and glowing halo. You thought urgency meant someday, not now. You thought the trembling in your gut was just anxiety, not alarm bells ringing from realms you've never dared believe in. But the warnings weren't just dreams or gut feelings, were they? No, they were stacked. Coincidences lined up like dominoes, waiting for one flick of awareness. Strange timings. Deja vu you couldn't shake. People entering your life like walking messages and then leaving like smoke because their part was done, and you didn't listen. You ignored every glitch in your carefully built lie of normal. And the messengers? Oh, they noticed. Every time you brushed off a moment that was supposed to change you, they flinched a little more. Can you imagine that? Angels flinching. You think you're just a small piece in a big world, right? Cute, humble. But wrong. You were the trigger, the lever, the spark. And when the heavens sent the code, you folded it up like junk mail. You kept walking in circles and calling it progress. Meanwhile, things were breaking inside you, around you, above you. And the only reason you're still here? Because something out there kept buying you time. Time you didn't earn. Time you didn't respect. And now that time's running a little thin. The warnings were never subtle. They were artfully disguised. Sure, this isn't a cartoon, it's a test. You want fireworks? No, you get patterns, repetition. The same lessons dressed in different people, the same pain recycled. Until finally one of those archangels leans in and says, "We've given them everything and they still don't see it." And that's where it gets dark. Because when the divine starts running out of patience, the next lesson isn't gentle. It's surgical. It removes whatever comfort you've been hiding behind. But you knew that. Somewhere in that electric little heart of yours, you felt the countdown. That tension between what you're pretending to be and what you're being called to be. You felt it every time you smiled for no one. Every time you laughed too loud at nothing. Every time the room went quiet and you didn't know why your chest got heavy. That wasn't depression. That was a whisper turning into a scream. But it's hard to hear the scream when you've trained yourself to smile through it, isn't it? You want to talk about free will, sure. Let's. You had the freedom to listen. You had the freedom to act. You had the freedom to become the weapon you were forged to be. And you chose delay. You chose comfort. You chose logic, reason, normal, over instinct, fire, chaos. You were given messages wrapped in madness, and you tried to file them neatly into your planner. That's not how this works. That's never how this works. Divine timing doesn't care about your schedule. It shows up when it must, and you either move or you bleed. They didn't send 1 angel, not even 3. They sent 7. That's a number that means something, you know? Completion. Perfection. Warning at full volume. And if they're shocked, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're ignoring what already tried to fix you. You're dancing on the edge of something ancient and you're still asking if it's safe. Still wondering if you need more proof, more signs, more gentle nudges. But this isn't the beginning of a journey. This was the last call. They weren't hiding. Not the signs, not the warnings, not the bleeding truth carved into the very air around you. You want to pretend they were subtle? Oh, no, no, no. That's the trick you pulled on yourself, the sweet little illusion you fed your mind to keep the game going just a little longer. Because if you admit the signs were clear, then you have to admit you ignored them. And that's a much harder pill to swallow, isn't it? That the whole time the universe was waving red flags in your face, and you put on sunglasses. It wasn't some riddle. It wasn't some riddle. It wasn't some cryptic code written in forgotten tongues. It was obvious, repetitive, in your face. The same scenarios looping again and again like some twisted sitcom rerun, except the punchline was always your own unraveling. The same pain in different disguises knocking on your door, politely asking, "Have you learned yet?" And you slammed the door, turned up the music, laughed it off and said, "Weird how that always happens to me." Weird. That's what you called it. They gave you the same lesson with different masks. And each time you chose not to look deeper. You blamed the people, the place, the timing. Anything but the pattern. Because to see the pattern means you have to admit there's something inside you drawing it in. Oh, but that's uncomfortable, isn't it? Better to call it bad luck. Better to say the world is unfair. That way you get to keep pretending you're just a victim of randomness, not a participant in a divine setup. They didn't whisper. They roared. Through people who left you. Through breakdowns that felt too cruel to be coincidence. Through things falling apart the exact moment you thought you had control. That wasn't sabotage. That was divine mercy, dressed like a mugger, trying to steal your fake life so you could finally wake up. But no, you held on. You clung to the illusion, fought for it, cried over it like it loved you back. All the while, the truth stood in front of you with blood on its hands and tears in its eyes, saying, "Why won't you look at me?" They're not shocked because you missed something. They're shocked because you missed everything. Like standing in a burning room looking at the smoke and saying, "It's probably just fog." Oh, you noticed the heat. You felt the sweat. But denial is a powerful drug. It'll tell you you're imagining it, that maybe this is just what growth feels like. But growth doesn't suffocate you. Growth doesn't circle back to the same old cliff with a new color of rope. You weren't blind. You were just selective. You didn't want to see the parts that required you to change. You wanted the miracle without the mess, the transformation without the destruction. You wanted to evolve without shedding a single skin. But the divine doesn't work that way. It doesn't care if you're scared. It only cares if you're ready. And when you weren't, it sent the message louder, sharper, until even the angels had to take a step back and ask, how loud do we have to get before this one hears? You called it life. You called it stress. You called it just the way things are. But deep down, somewhere in that place you don't talk about, you knew. You knew it was all connected. The repeat betrayals, the almosts, the sudden stops, the heartbreaks that felt like assassins. They were all part of a map, and you folded it up, threw it in a drawer, and said, "I'll figure it out later." Except there isn't always a later. Sometimes the signs aren't just signs. They're final warnings dressed as familiar pain, begging you to stop pretending it's all just random static on your little radio of reason. You don't even know how many things didn't happen to you. How many bullets swerved midair. How many plans with your name on them fell apart in someone else's head. You think the bad days were tough, The funny part is you've only seen a fraction of the chaos that almost touched you. Not because you're lucky, not because you're clever, but because someone was standing in front of you while you weren't even looking. While you were busy spiraling over missed texts and broken routines, there was a war behind the curtain keeping you in one piece. It's hilarious, really. The way you talk about being stuck, cursed, overlooked, when in reality you've been wrapped in so much divine protection you should have been glowing. But you didn't notice it because protection doesn't scream. It doesn't show up in flashing lights. It happens quietly, invisibly, like a glitch in someone's plan, like a hesitation in a heartbeat that stopped a disaster. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's effective. And you walked right through it like it was nothing. You think you survived things because they weren't that serious, because they passed, because you're resilient. Cute word. But the truth is, a lot of what didn't hit you wasn't because of you, it was in spite of you. You were too distracted to duck, too numb to move, too asleep to even realize something was aiming for your soul. And it didn't land, not because you were fast, but because someone stepped in when you didn't even know there was a choice to make. That car that almost hit you, that friend you just happened to meet before you broke completely. That one moment where everything could have ended and instead something shifted. That wasn't fate. That was intervention. That was prevention. That was protection with its arms outstretched while you were mid-fall, arguing with your reflection about whether or not you're worth saving. And still, they saved you. Again and again. While you cursed the sky and questioned your purpose. You were kept from so many things. Jobs that would have crushed your spirit. People who smiled with knives in their teeth. Paths that looked like shortcuts but were dressed up traps. And you called it rejection, loss, failure. You lit candles for the doors that wouldn't open, not realizing they were on fire on the other side. That every no was a shield. That every delay was a wall put there to stop you from walking into your own destruction like it was a welcome party. They watched you cry over those walls, punch them, beg them to fall, and they didn't, because behind you was life. Ahead of you, collapse. But you didn't see that. You were so focused on what you thought was supposed to happen, you missed what didn't. And that's where the real comedy is. You think pain shaped you, but it's what you didn't feel that really protected your becoming. The trauma that got canceled before it could be scheduled. The damage that couldn't find your address. The demons that got rerouted because someone up there still believed in your unfinished story. The game was never fair, but it was rigged in your favor more times than you care to admit. And even now, even after all the warnings, all the signs, all the reroutes and divine detours, you still walk around like you're cursed, like you're forgotten, like nothing's watching over you. As if protection only counts when you can see it, touch it, post about it. But the best protection doesn't ask to be thanked. It just does its job, quietly, until the day it finally stops and you feel what the world really had planned for you without it. It starts small, always does. A little compromise here, a tiny avoidance there. Just a thought you shove into the corner of your mind and pretend isn't screaming. Later, you say. It's not the right time, you whisper. Like timing ever cared about your comfort. You skip the call, you ignore the signal, you delay the leap. One skipped moment turns into 2, then 3. And before you know it, you've built a damn empire of avoidance. Pretty little castle made of excuses, polished with smiles, decorated with motivational quotes you don't believe anymore. But the thing about skipping your moment is it doesn't leave things empty. No, life doesn't work that way. When you dodge the purpose, something else takes its place. And it's not peace. It's not freedom. It's something darker, something patient. It waits in the silence you created when you walked away from the thing that was supposed to set you on fire. It grows in the gap you left behind. You think you're safe because nothing's happening, but nothing is where the real horror lives. See, you thought not choosing was neutral. You thought skipping meant postponing. But skipping meant postponing. But skipping your moment is like skipping the only exit on a collapsing bridge. You don't see the collapse right away. That's the clever part. You keep driving. Everything looks stable. The cracks are small. Just a bump here, a shudder there. You still think you're in control. That's the punchline, the illusion. Because every time you delay the calling, you give something else room to move in. Something not quite on your side. And oh, it loves your avoidance. It feeds on it. Grows stronger every time you convince yourself that you're not ready yet. It plants lies in the space where courage should have bloomed. Little whispers like, "Who do you think you are?" Or maybe later, when things make more sense. But things won't make sense. That was never the deal. They weren't supposed to. You were supposed to move anyway. That was the test. That's the part you skipped. You thought you needed clarity when you really needed faith. You asked for signs when you were supposed to be the sign. And what replaces purpose? Bitterness. Regret. A hollow kind of noise that follows you around like a lost dog. You feel it at night, when you're almost asleep. When it gets quiet enough for the truth to tap you on the shoulder. That's when the shadow slips in. Not some monster with claws, just that empty echo of what you could have done. That itch that no distraction can scratch. The one you drown in fake dopamine, food, scrolling, noise, whatever your favorite poison is this week. Every time you said no to the thing that terrified you but also lit you up, you weren't saying no to fear. You were saying yes to slow decay. Because purpose doesn't wait forever. It doesn't babysit. It knocks. Then it walks. And what follows it in its absence isn't passive. It's not neutral. It's hungry. And it comes wearing the mask of comfort, job security, a steady routine, validation from people who don't even see you. And it all feels safe until it doesn't. Until one day you wake up and your soul is coughing dust and your dreams are dressed in funeral black. You weren't just skipping a chance. You were skipping the thing that was meant to protect you. The mission, the moment, the madness, whatever name you give it, that was your shield. And without it, you're exposed, vulnerable, open to anything and everything that decides to walk in. Purpose is a gatekeeper. It holds the line, but only when you show up. Only when you stand inside it, bleeding if you must, but present. And when you're not, something else steps in. And it doesn't protect. It devours. It wasn't a lightning bolt moment. No booming voice from the sky. No burning bush. No divine hand reaching through the clouds with a scroll and a signature. It was quieter, weirder, like a gut feeling that wouldn't shut up, like a glitch in the rhythm of your day, like something in the room changed and you couldn't point at it, but you knew. That was the message. That was the nudge. That was the whisper that turned into static when you ignored it for the 5th, the 6th, the 12th time. And it wasn't silence after that. It was withdrawal, not absence, not punishment. Just that shift in the air when something gives up on trying to convince you. You want the divine to beg? You want meaning to knock forever while you binge mediocrity and scroll your way out of feeling anything real? It won't. It leaves. It doesn't slam the door. It just stops knocking. And that's the danger, isn't it? When the universe stops bothering, when the chills stop coming, when you don't feel anything anymore. Numbness isn't peace. It's the echo of a calling that got tired of waiting. You weren't ignored. You weren't abandoned. You were noticed, repeatedly, until even the watchers, the ones who rarely speak, had to turn to each other and wonder why the chosen one kept ducking the spotlight like it was a sniper's aim. You were warned in silence. Not because there wasn't anything to say, but because everything had already been said. 1,000 times, through 1,000 moments. Every painful loop you went through was a sentence. Every loss was a line. The whole script was written and handed to you in experiences, but you skipped the read. It's funny how you kept praying for answers while standing in the middle of them, asking for signs while the signs were literally knocking dishes off your table. Show me a reason, you said, right after watching another toxic door slam shut, another betrayal unfold like a rerun you've seen too many times. But instead of decoding the message, you changed the channel, called it bad luck, blamed your stars, asked for clarity while wiping the warning signs off your windshield like bird droppings. You think the silence means nothing's watching, that maybe you were wrong about the whole thing. That maybe there never was a message, never was a plan, just chaos, just randomness. But what if I told you the silence is the message now? That your refusal to act made the messengers pack up and move on? That your indecision became the decision? That the longer you wait for a clear sign, the more you become the cautionary tale others whisper about? You can't say no 100 times and expect 101. At some point, the offering dries up. The fire cools. The players leave the stage. And there you are in the empty theater, clapping at ghosts, waiting for a show that already ended. You weren't skipped. You skipped yourself. And now, when the world is quiet, it's not peace, it's vacancy. You made it that way. By ignoring the goosebumps, by silencing the restlessness, by training yourself to believe that not now doesn't eventually become never. It's not that there's no protection left. It's that you were supposed to be the protection, the change, the floodgate, the one who heard the static and translated it into a warning for the rest. But how do you save anyone when you won't even admit the message was meant for you? They didn't give up on you. They gave in to your decision. You chose to treat the divine like background noise. And now that it's quiet, now that the chills stopped, now that the weird synchronicities faded, you miss them. But what you miss isn't magic. It's responsibility dressed as wonder. And wonder has better places to be than ignored by someone who keeps calling themselves lost to avoid being found. You're waiting for a miracle with your arms crossed, waiting for a rescue while sinking in quicksand you stepped into on purpose. It's comical, really, how you keep looking up at the sky asking, "Where are you?" when the question should be, "Where have you been?" Not them. You. You weren't forgotten. You were watched. Watched as you danced around your calling like it was a campfire you were scared to sit by. Watched as you asked for help you had no intention of accepting. Because help comes with change, and change, that's messy. That's work. That's terrifying. You confuse silence for abandonment. That's your trick. That's your excuse. You pretend not hearing anything means no one's listening, but that's not how it works. The silence is louder than any shout. The silence means the test already started. It means the cheat sheet's gone and now it's just you, your choices, and all the signals you ignored when they were wrapped in drama, fireworks, angel numbers, gut feelings you called indigestion. You didn't get ditched. You got distanced. There's a difference. You ever try to guide someone who keeps turning the wheel the other way? At some point, you stop yelling. You sit back. You let them drive into the wall because maybe, the crash will do what the whispers couldn't. Maybe the pain will wake you up. Not because the universe enjoys watching you suffer, but because you left it no other tools, no other language. And pain speaks fluently when nothing else gets through. You say you want the truth, but you want it soft. You want it like a bedtime story, not a slap. But truth doesn't do lullabies. Truth breaks. Truth shatters. And truth, when it finally steps forward, doesn't come with a hug. It comes with a mirror. You think the silence is a punishment? No. The silence is the moment before the consequences introduce themselves. You're protected right up until the moment you start pretending you don't need to be. That's the line. That's where the shield cracks. When arrogance replaces accountability. When you confuse free will with immunity. When you think dodging alignment makes you smart instead of just slow suicide in a smiley mask. You were never abandoned. You were just given the space you asked for, over and over. Every time you said, "I got this," when you didn't. Every time you walked away from the very thing sent to save you because it didn't look the way you wanted it to. And now you call it quiet. Now you feel exposed. Now the cold has set in and you're wondering where the warmth went. But the warmth never left. You did. You drifted. You diluted. You disconnected. Because connection comes with cost. It means letting go of comfort. Letting go of your fantasy that you can outsmart your own destiny by avoiding eye contact with it. You can't trick purpose. You can't ghost your own potential without consequences. They're not angry. They're not punishing you. They're just watching. Watching you dodge meaning like it's a virus. Watching you build a personality out of your pain and wear it like armor. But you weren't meant to be bulletproof. You were meant to be used. Used by something bigger, for something heavier. And until you let yourself break open, not for likes, not for sympathy, but for real, you'll keep calling the silence abandonment, when really it's the sound of your own refusal echoing back at you with no one left to argue with. They expect fear. They anticipate collapse. They're prepared for weakness, failure, even chaos. That's all built into the game. What they didn't see coming was the delusion. That special kind of human magic where someone looks straight at their own destruction and says, "Nah, I'm fine." It's not the crying that throws them off, not the pain or the panic. No, it's the denial. That eerie, smiling, Instagram-filtered denial you wear like perfume to hide the rot. That's what stuns them. That's what makes even the ones upstairs take a step back like, did this one really just shrug off the apocalypse like it's bad weather? You've been circling the same lesson like a vulture waiting for something to die so it can finally eat. But nothing's dying because nothing's being faced. You want your purpose without the process. You want destiny without the detour through hell. But it doesn't work like that. The reason they're shocked isn't because you're broken. Broken is expected. It's the refusal to admit you're broken that turns the whole room cold. You keep pretending your chaos is cute. You meme your misery, hashtag your numbness, turn your trauma into trending content while whispering to yourself that you're healing. You're not. You're hiding. Big difference. They watch you build towers on sand, again and again. You call it hustle. You call it growth. But the foundation's a lie, and they know it. You skipped the shadow work, slapped on a vision board, and prayed for a breakthrough. But here's the twist. The universe doesn't deliver to alternate addresses. You can't fake your way into alignment. You can't package pain into productivity and call it evolution. They're not buying it, and deep down, neither are you. You were shown the truth. You were handed it in pieces, in people, in moments that shattered the illusion. And you glued the illusion back together anyway. Duct taped your identity and walked right back into the fire like it was a sauna. And now the flames are rising, the walls are melting, and instead of running, you're filming it, capturing content while your soul's house burns to the ground. They didn't expect strength, they expected awakening. There's a difference. Strength without self-awareness is just ego lifting heavy things. They sent signs, synchronicities, warnings dressed in dreams. But you've got a filter for that, don't you? You mute discomfort. You mute reality. You'd rather feel nothing than feel wrong. That's what they didn't calculate. That in the face of divine confrontation, you'd choose distraction. That you'd take the signal and drown it in dopamine. And now they're staring, not with anger, not with judgment, just with the quiet disbelief of someone watching a rescue get refused in slow motion. You think you're waiting for a breakthrough, but the breakthrough's been knocking. You're just too busy painting the door with affirmations to hear it. You made your own noise so loud, not even heaven can cut through the feedback. They didn't expect perfection. They expected participation. But you skipped the ceremony, ignored the initiation. And now you're wearing a crown you didn't earn, wondering why it feels so heavy. That's the weight of pretending. That's the cost of showing up for everything except the thing that matters most. They're not stunned by your struggle. They're stunned that you've made it your identity. That instead of using your wounds as weapons, you built a brand out of them. That instead of standing up, you knelt down to comfort. And now you pray for protection from consequences you disguised as choices. The shock isn't that you fell. It's that you chained yourself to the ground and called it stability. You weren't asked to be fearless. You were asked to see. And somehow that's the one thing you've refused to do with your eyes wide open. It starts as a whisper, a flicker. That flicker turns into a tap, then a knock, then a bang, then nothing. Silence, not peace, because it tried. The message tried to reach you. It crept into your thoughts during conversations, hid behind certain songs, smuggled itself into dreams that made no sense on the surface, but rattled your chest when you woke up. You noticed. You felt it. But you brushed it off like static, like emotional indigestion, like some vague existential drizzle you didn't have time to deal with between notifications. It's funny, really, how you keep asking for signs as if you haven't been surrounded by them for years. You think the universe is a polite teacher with a laser pointer. You think it's going to diagram your destiny on a whiteboard and hand you a syllabus. No. That's not how this works. It doesn't give you answers. It reminds you of the ones you've already buried. And if you keep pretending you don't know what you know, eventually the reminders stop feeling like guidance and start feeling like guilt. Because the truth never really leaves. It just gets louder in the dark. You want to believe you missed the memo, that the message went to the wrong address. That maybe it wasn't clear enough, but you got it. Oh, you got it. You just didn't like what it asked you to do, because it asked for sacrifice, for surrender, for action when you were still clinging to comfort. And now the price of pretending is showing up in your own reflection. That sense of decay, that rot behind the smile, that's not depression. That's denial with its sleeves rolled up. The universe isn't cruel, but it is surgical. And when it removes what you refuse to release, you call it loss. You call it punishment. But deep down, you know it's just the cost of ignoring what you were built to carry. You weren't supposed to wait. You weren't supposed to wander. You were supposed to respond. The message wasn't passive. It was direct. It was urgent. And every time you paused to overthink it, something else in you began to fade. The warning isn't a threat. It's a last resort. And when divinity begs, when the signs escalate, it's not because it's desperate. It's because you're running out of time to pretend. You're not confused. You're stalling. You're addicted to distraction, to delay, to dipping your toe into purpose and screaming when it burns. You're not scared of failure. You're scared of being seen succeeding, because then you lose your excuses. You lose your hiding place. You lose the identity you built around almost. You think you're invisible, but you're not. You've been watched this whole time, observed, not judged, just studied. Like a creature refusing to evolve in an environment custom built for transformation. The angels didn't look away. They looked through you, waiting, hushed, hoping the moment would come when you finally cracked open, when you finally admitted the truth had been sitting in your lungs like smoke, waiting for breath. You're not missing anything. You're avoiding it. And that avoidance has weight. It has energy. It shows in how you move, in how you speak, in how you dream smaller every time reality inches closer to what you asked for. You don't fear the unknown. You fear what happens when you run out of reasons not to listen, because then you'd have to act. You'd have to change. You'd have to stop performing confusion and start becoming the answer that's been trying to take root in you since the first flicker appeared in the dark and whispered, "You already know."